Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always great to come out to San Diego. You heard that I was in the Navy at one point. And indeed, I was a pilot of these things, which are not being shown on the screen. They're showing on my screen, but not on your screen. So maybe if we could just have everyone come with me on the stage. So I'm just going to keep going while everyone over in the IT area tries to get this going. So I flew F-18 fighters. I have actually spent a significant portion of my life when at Miramar. I've gone to Top Gun, before it became a Marine Corps base. So I have been part of what I would call, I'm a heavy equipment operator. But I learned a lot of lessons because I was in the A4 first and then the F-18 and then so that's like going from a Mazda Miata to a present day Ferrari. It's just a huge difference in technologies. And a lot of people died in that time. When I flew fighters, on average, one person a month died for 3 years in a row that I knew. That's 36 people. 35 men, 1 woman, and it just became, oh, good, we're starting to, oops. Now we're really populating. It's like you, nope, still not working. So then I was able to see how going too quickly towards a world of autonomy, automation that we didn't really understand, how that could be deadly. And that made me go back to school, got my PhD. Then I was at MIT for 10 years. Then I was at Duke for 10 years, roughly a decade. Now I'm at Mason. I wonder if they ever get worried about when I come up to the 10-year mark, I'm going to be gone, because I'm going to retire. That's what's going to happen. Okay, I don't know why you can't see these pictures, so we're just going to, I'm not sure what's happening, because that's not the screen I'm on. Oh, okay, all right, we're going to go with that. That's the F-18. That's me transitioning to drones. Why that's important is because drones are, of course, the new big technology that's going to revolutionize the world. AI has been an enabler, what we call good old-fashioned AI. Then I transitioned, while I was at Duke, I transitioned into self-driving cars. The one thing that's really been a key part of my career is I was able to see what was about to happen with technology before everybody else was able to see it, and as a researcher, that's kind of important. But one of the things that I'm going to talk about today, which is a little-known aspect of my career, is how much time I've spent in remote operations centers, which is what the military does with all the drones. Indeed, this is starting to become a thing with self-driving cars, but there's a lot of remote operations of technology where humans fill in the gaps of capabilities that the systems do not have yet, right? So we need humans. When AI can't cut it, we need humans to backfill. We've been doing it for 30 years in the military, and it turns out that the commercial world has just figured this out. So I'm going to give you the Missy Cummings framework for how you know AI is going to take your job, your kids' jobs, your grandkids' jobs, and that is on this curve what I call the SRKE framework, which I built from an earlier researcher, Jens Rasmussen, in the Netherlands. So the idea is that any autonomous agent, whether that's you, an agentic AI that you're hearing a lot of, that entity has to step through these levels of reasoning. So I'm going to put it in context of driving because everybody knows how to drive or has been in a car. So at the bottom level, you have skill-based reasoning. And what that means is you see signs, symbols, you see signals in the world that then tell you how to do an automated response. So keeping in between the white lines. So when you first learned to drive, you had to really concentrate to stay in between the white lines. And then after a couple hours of driving, you never had to consciously think about it again, because then it was highly automatic. And indeed, that's still true. And in fact, I see a lot of people in this room, it becomes true until when? When your sensors start to degrade, when your eyes start to degrade, and it becomes harder to make out those symbols in the world that you need to figure out for example, how to stay in between. But as long as you can see it, you can respond appropriately. When you get that automatically, then it frees up cognitive resources to go to rule-based reasoning. This is when we start to see the signs, symbols, signals in the world that govern our behavior, not just our reactions. And stop signs, for example. Everyone knows who's driving or riding, what happens when you hit a stop sign. Once that becomes highly automatic, once you really understand the rules of your world, then you can graduate to something we call knowledge-based reasoning. And you're starting to see that uncertainty curve, which is getting bigger. And indeed, this is where knowledge-based reasoning becomes critical. This is judgment under uncertainty. The world doesn't exactly match the world that maybe we learned, but we have to make some educated guesses. And indeed, you see the stop sign with leaves growing across it. It's not a complete stop sign like you learned, but every single person in this room, you can even see just 10% of that stop sign, and you're going to know that is a stop sign. I know the red, the white border. I don't even have to think about it. It's highly automatic. Unfortunately, this is a real problem with self-driving cars, which Waymo is trying really hard to bring them to San Diego if you're from this area. They're already in San Francisco and LA, and we're going to talk about some of their issues here in a second. But the cars do a terrible job at seeing partial objects. And the problem with this is that in the spring, the sign is completely clear. By late summer, if you're in the south, the kudzu has grown almost everything, right? And the world is dynamic, and unfortunately, these cars learn in a very static way. And that becomes a problem because if you can't reason under uncertainty, and this is just a tiny bit of uncertainty, what happens when there's a lot of uncertainty, like when I show this picture? Yep, sure enough, this is a intersection somewhere in America, and I'm one of those obnoxious people. I have a Jeep, so I think I can go everywhere. And I have been in places like this, that if you got there, you weren't supposed to be there, you did something wrong, how do you get out? I mean, you just back up. All right, you go the way you came because you know you got there, so you can at least go back that way you came. Unfortunately, you say that's so easy, that's such easy reasoning. That is not reasoning that AI has. If you don't remember anything else I tell you today, remember, AI doesn't think, it doesn't reason, it doesn't know, it doesn't understand, it doesn't imagine. AI is linear algebra on steroids. That's it. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about it's a good, useful tool, but it is a tool that doesn't think, doesn't reason, doesn't know, cannot reason under uncertainty. And let me give you some examples. So, skill-based reasoning. In California and San Francisco, this was Cruise, who no longer operates their self-driving cars, and I'll tell you why in a second. The issue here is the car ran into the back of a bus. We being the experts who do all the public commentary, did not think this accident was possible because these cars have LiDAR. This is a laser rangefinder with millimeter precision accuracy. How is it possible on this bright sunny day that the car would run into the back of the bus? I say bright sunny day because these cars cannot operate in the rain that we're having today. Which is hardly ever happens in San Diego, and I've been coming in and out of San Diego for 30 plus years, and I've never seen it rain like this. Okay, so what happened? It turns out in the investigation that the computer vision system was determined to be the primary sensor, meaning that it only called the LiDAR if there was some uncertainty. Now, the other thing you have to remember about AI is that it's a psychopath. It thinks it's amazing. And always right. And if you don't get the uncertainty quantification right, you're going to have a problem, which is what happened here. The computer vision system learned what a bus looked like. It had never been trained on an articulated bus, which was what this was. So it didn't, when it saw the articulated bus, the bendy bus in the middle, it didn't know what it was because it had never seen a back end like that. So what it did is it caught the front end and then basically did dead reckoning, drew a line back and said, that bus ends at 50 feet behind the line. And then, of course, it's much longer. So it was invisible. The back end of the bus was invisible. And because AI is a psychopath, it didn't even call the LiDAR because it was 100% sure it got that right, like all my students. All right, so yeah, bad day. It didn't perceive the world correctly. And if you can't perceive the world correctly, you cannot then develop important reasoning that goes on after that. So now let's move to the second picture. So now you're seeing right here, this just happened in Austin, Texas. This is a Waymo who's trying to roll out in Texas, and if you can't see, the car is turning into 3 lanes of oncoming traffic. So you're like, what? Like, you know, that's pretty straightforward. Why is the car even on that side of the road turning into traffic? It turns out that Waymo and companies like Tesla are doing something called end-to-end learning. They think that they can just show videos to a neural net, and that neural net then learns everything it needs to learn. There's a good example of how brittle neural nets are. You should not be turning into traffic, and in the old days when Waymo was using regular machine learning, it wasn't doing this. So this is a new problem that's cropped up, and it just goes to show you we don't really understand the failure modes of AI. Up here on knowledge-based reasoning, basically knowledge and expert-based reasoning, this is the accident that caused crews to lose their ability to operate. It hit a pedestrian and then drug her 7 miles an hour for 20 feet because it didn't know that it had hit her when she fell under the car. It didn't realize that that's where she was. These things don't think, they don't know, they don't reason. This is an object permanence problem that even small children get at a very young age. But when it fell out of sight, it lost track of her and never thought about her again, and she spent a year in the hospital. So what we're seeing is there's some failure modes that we should be getting as computer scientists, and those fall under something called epistemic uncertainty. They're about our knowledge. We know that computer vision is terrible. It is the worst possible sensor. Teslas are never going to be self-driving cars, real self-driving cars, using just computer vision only. We teach our students in Robotics 101, you need multiple pieces of information if you're going to make precise decisions. They can't do it just on computer vision, but yet Cruise made that mistake early on. You know, and I have former students at Cruise. I should rescind their degrees. But then there's some other problems that we have, aleatoric uncertainty. And aleatoric uncertainty is really the uncertainty that comes from statistical processes. And that's just a huge source of uncertainty wherever you have neural nets. And so that is actually why what most people do not know about self-driving cars in America is they require intense babysitting. All of them, Waymo, Tesla, Cruise when it was operating, but all the other companies in America have remote operation centers where warehouses of people are helping the cars, giving the cars the right path to go. It happens under 2 ways. They're either remotely assisted, that's what you're seeing in the top picture. This is Waymo using operators to interpret signs, symbols, signals in the world. The cars don't understand that stop sign with leaves growing across it, so there's a human saying it's a stop sign and you can go, enter. The bottom is even more dangerous, which Waymo doesn't do this, we think, but other companies do, is remote driving. It's a video game. Super dangerous. Unbelievably dangerous. The good news is I'm a consultant to the state of California, and California is on top of this. The bad news is for everybody else not living in California, no other state really cares about this right now. And it's a huge safety issue, not the least of which is because of the latency in the signal. You need the latency of the signal to be on order of about 30 milliseconds, and it's at least an order of magnitude more than that. So no one knows this, no one's talking about it, and I think that it's really important for you, I referenced this earlier, when AI struggles, we have humans fill in the gap. But we're having humans fill in the gap in a way that the time latency suggests this could be dangerous. Waymo's operators are in the Philippines. That introduces another up to 2 seconds delay in the signals coming back. That's not safe, even if it is only remote assistance. And that leads me to my last slide, which is the uncertainty. You're like, well, so what is she talking about kryptonite? In all cases, the uncertainty when it's not effectively managed, AI does terribly. This is true for AI in computer vision. It's true for AI in generative AI. When you're trying to use a chatbot and it doesn't give you the right answer, it means that whatever you're asking about is not well represented in the database. So the uncertainty is high. There's also additional uncertainty in the way the tokens are predicted, which I'm not going to get into because I think we have another speaker, and I'm happy to talk with you about offline. But what we're seeing is what this picture is. This picture is, I'm worried that we're never, okay, good, we're never going to see it again. This picture is, on the x-axis is determinism. Good old-fashioned AI is deterministic software, meaning the rules are executed, they perform the same way every time, no matter what. Non-deterministic AI is what you find in neural nets, that every time that you rerun them, they will not give you the same answer for lots of statistical reasons, which we can talk about later, but that's especially true in anything with generative AI because it's layers and layers and layers of neural nets. Now, in the world of weird, I actually do have to run around the country and internationally to the United Nations and talk about, we really should not have generative AI and lethal autonomous weapons. And actually crazy, this week it's nuclear weapons. We should definitely not have AI anywhere close to nuclear weapons or anything nuclear really at all because of the high hallucination rate. Even OpenAI has said that their generative AI hallucinates about 1/3 of the time, and that's an underestimate. These technologies are amazingly brittle. They do work really well in creative environments. But if you have a safety critical system, and that's the middle axis where someone can die, we don't have any idea how to test these, by the way, no one. The military's been doing this for about a decade. No Waymo, Tesla, nobody has any idea how to test these things effectively. There's no rules, there's no standards, there's no commonly accepted practices because the technology is so new and evolving. And so that is my big point about wherever you find AI, especially if it's touching a safety critical system, we must insist on basically a whole new testing framework, if not testing community, to get people to understand non-deterministic AI, it can have some very powerful uses. Trust me, all my students use it like crazy, and don't send me an email that's generated by AI because I'm not going to read it. I'm going to delete it. I know it right away when you do that, because AI, even in a generative environment, follows its own particular script. But that script has a lot of holes in it, and those scripts cannot be attached to safety critical systems until we figure out how to test them, and that's in the lab, in simulation, and in the real world. We as a community need to come together and say, look, testing may not be cool, and researchers, academics, we hate it because we don't want to show you where our technologies are not working. But we have to start with a new mindset when it comes to AI and say, if I don't see the results of how it's been tested in this environment, I need to really hold it at an arm's length, especially if somebody's life is on the line. Thank you very much.
No Waymo yet this morning. Missy, thank you very much. Please don't disappear. I know that there are probably questions. Missy, I have a question for you, but I know that there are questions in the audience because this audience is full of AI interest and anxiety. I think Missy has turned into a non-deterministic object herself. Right? There we go. Well, I'll start out because you were talking about computer vision and the failure of computer vision in these automated cars. The human brain works beautifully. When vision fails or is beginning to fail, as you pointed out, there are all these other sort of relays that are instantly brought into use. They're recruited so that your hearing acuity, your tactile acuity increases when something is beginning to fail, so that you instantly make accommodations neurologically to an impending crisis. Can these modalities not be realistically programmed now, or are people working on this so that we can have fail-safe systems that respond in a way more naturally to crises?
So I think it's really important to recognize that the car companies are doing what they can. And I do think that in narrow environments, so is it safe to take a Waymo in San Francisco? As long as you stay off the highway, your speeds are so low that, yeah, I think that's safe enough. We've seen that they're about as safe as Uber and Lyft drivers, which is to say they're having accidents 4 to 6 times more likely than regular drivers. This should make you really think about taking an Uber or Lyft. So people are trying to figure out what those failure modes are. But in the world of anthropomorphism, I think it's dangerous to start thinking that they fail like we fail. And so this goes back to that epistemic uncertainty. We keep wanting to associate our failures with their failures, and it makes us not see that they're new and different failure modes. For example, self-driving cars are hit at least twice as often from behind as regular human cars. And we have figured out that this is coming from hallucinations. They are also hallucinating just like large language models do. And so those hallucinations make them see things that aren't there. And we have no idea how to fix that. I'm running around the country talking to people, trying to get them to fix it, but we'll see.
And the point that you brought out at the end of your lecture about the people who are developing this with all sorts of pride and bravado are not likely to want to engage on the shortcomings because, of course, they want to promote, they want to continue to grow, they want to increase the profitability of their own venture. So how do you get around this very human failing when it comes to human safety?
You sue the pants off the companies when they do something stupid. I'd like to tell you that that's a joke. It's not really a joke. I was part of a landmark lawsuit against Tesla last summer where Tesla had a $243 million judgment against them. But the reason that happened is because Tesla refused to engage in what we would consider to be just the basic standard of testing and development that you would expect out of anyone who is operating in a safety critical system. I think that there's a problem with the Silicon Valley ethos of move fast, break things. That's great, and I'm a technologist and a roboticist, so I'm all for advancing technology, but when it comes to putting it in the everyday hands of people, or nuclear-tipped missiles, don't we think we should have some established practices? And the instant you say that, Silicon Valley, in a unified voice says, oh, you just want to stop innovation. You're such a Luddite. I cannot tell you the number of times I've been called a Luddite. And you're like, no, just asking for principled approaches to test and evaluation is just a good idea. It has nothing to do with stopping innovation.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Barbara.
Please state your name and where you're from.
Barbara Gross, Bethesda, Maryland. Hi, Missy. Thank you for what you've been doing for decades, not just now, even before AI could do anything useful. Picking up on Nina's question a bit. Software verification is used a lot now for various kinds of software. It won't solve all of the problems you've talked about. It's, I think, a critical addendum to testing and evaluation. By the way, for people in the audience, the National Academies issued a report fostering responsible computing research a few years ago. It talks about, to Nina's question, it talks about needing governments, NGOs, communities to step in and stand up for the kinds of things Missy is talking about. So I think it's great you've informed this wonderful audience. So is there a role for the equivalent for verification in addressing some of the problems that you've talked about?
So as you've mentioned, software verification has been its own subfield in computer science for a long time, and it's really been focused on the deterministic side of software because they, like everybody else, have no idea how to principally test non-deterministic AI. I will tell you the big problem, though, it's not the software verification people, it's the National Science Foundation. It is, the National Science Foundation has told me their official policy towards safety is that it's not a research area. This doesn't deserve NSF funding. It is what companies should be doing anyway. It's just part of applications, so we shouldn't fund it. I think that's very wrong. And I think that that's why I'm advocating for people to understand that this is new and different. And if no one, even especially the software verification people, if they don't know how to address this animal, then we need to stand back and say, okay, just because things might have application to many commercial industries doesn't mean that it isn't a legitimate research field on its own.
Please state your name and where you're from.
I'm Dee Dume. I'm here as a fan of my sister Susan that was just inducted. I have sort of, well, it's not two-part. Primarily, I want to say thank you so much for your service. It's extremely appreciated. We're originally from Maine, but my partner and I winter in Florida, so that's where we came up from. My question, not being a scientist, just sort of looking at stuff from the outside, with all the tests and the faux pas that happen in the real world with the testing, is there any plan B? Is there anybody seeing remotely, oh, this vehicle is going to hit a bus. Oh, there's a pedestrian there. Is there anybody actually sitting in the vehicle, or is it all off-site? There has to be some, for lack of a better word, accountability of control for what is happening. You know, short of a human being putting a brake on or turning the wheel. How does that work?
Well, the plan B is the remote operators. And the problem with plan B is that in surface transportation, with a up to 2-second delay from the Philippines, and we've already seen a crash in California that was caused by this. There was a Waymo taking a left turn, unprotected left, at an intersection in San Francisco. Caltrans had moved the light just 6 inches when they had done work on it. And because it moved it 6 inches, the computer vision system couldn't see it. It was just like that bus situation that I told you about. And so it was invisible, but it knew a light should have been there, so it called the remote operator and then asked the remote operator whether or not what the color the signal was. And by the time when it sent this request, it had just turned yellow. And when the operator saw it, it was yellow. So the operator was like, sure, take a left. And then all that time delay happened, and then it was red. And then the car took a left. There were 2 people in the back, and there was a collision. Fortunately, it was slow speed, and nobody was seriously hurt. But it's just a matter of time before somebody is seriously hurt. There's an outrage right now in San Francisco, if you've been following it. A bodega cat was killed. Yes, these things cannot see small mammals low at tire level. What about a child on a trike? We do not, we have no indication, and Waymo will not tell us what they've tested. They won't tell you what's in the training set. So we don't know whether or not these systems really have the ability to execute correctly on a plan B. For those of you living in California, we're on it though, and there'll be new regulations coming out soon. For the rest of you, we'll see.
I'm Ted Lawrenson from Berkeley. I would say preliminarily both that this is an absolutely fabulous talk and that as a lawyer, although my question doesn't have anything to do with that, I am amused by a technologist acknowledging that the slow, uncertain ways of lawyers could have a useful role in controlling such things. But in any event, what I was reminded by what you were saying of what little I know about the history of the attempts to develop AI, and the fact, as I understand it, that the failed attempts at development of AI for decades prior to the current explosion of using neural networks and that kind of training was to try to give computers a true map of the world by putting inputs in. And what occurs to me in listening to you is that what we are talking about is the very fact that this mode of learning does not provide the computer with the kind of map of the world that one develops, because I would suggest, and I think this actually, interestingly enough, reminded me of something in one of yesterday's talk, because of innate capabilities evolutionarily developed in the brain that provide a framework for the development of maps of the way the world operates, which of course are not themselves sufficient, but which provide a framework within which sensory input and social development allow you to come to an understanding that could not actually be developed simply from inputs. So it reminds me of the old exchanges back when I was first in college studying psychology of the difference whether or not you could actually give those kinds of capabilities to a machine, the kind of developing an entire map of the world that we do because of our evolved mental capacities, which are not just trained on the basis of sensory input, but are inborn in the way our brains operate.
So first I want to say, I did want to just briefly touch on the legal aspect. I spend far too much time trying to unlearn lawyers of their poor world models in their head about technology. I would love to team up with a law school and start developing a whole new breed of lawyer who is just as technically competent as legally competent. But to your question is about higher levels of cognition and even metacognition. And the answer is no. Nope, not happening. Not happening in my lifetime. No one has to worry about artificial general intelligence. We have to worry about AI incompetence and illiteracy more than we need to worry about. General intelligence is not happening. Large language models are not even close to producing anything. And even Jan LeCun, one of the inventors, has said not happening. So I'm not the only one out there. But the metacognition that humans provide is their strength and their superpower that offsets the kryptonite of uncertainty for AI. So I really believe that we should be pushing more for collaborative teaming arrangements between AI and humans as opposed to replacement. Thank you. I think I'm getting the hook.